The tipping point. The sun rose lazily over the rolling hills of my grandfather's farm, bathing everything in a warm golden light. It was my favorite time of day, the peaceful quiet interrupted only by the soft clucking of chickens and the gentle rustle of leaves. I relished these weekends, escaping the noise of the city to tend to the land that had been in my family for generations. But on that ordinary Tuesday morning, my simple life shattered into pieces. I was collecting eggs from the coop when a strange, rumbling sound grazed my ears. Curiosity piqued, I made my way to the south pasture, where I saw them for the first time. Three figures, clad in matching polo shirts, hammering stakes into the ground with purposeful determination. At their helm stood Eleanor Hargrove, the president of the Mitoark Estates Homeowners Association, wielding authority like a sword. "What do you think you're doing on my property?" I called out, my pulse quickening as I jogged down the hill to confront them. Eleanor turned, her smile as frosty as the morning air. "Ah, the current resident," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "I'm Eleanor Hargrove. According to our documents, this property was officially incorporated into our development last month. We're planning to construct a gas station here. Very convenient for the neighborhood." My stomach twisted in disbelief. "You must be mistaken. This is private farmland. There's no HOA here." "Oh, but the paperwork is finalized," she replied, handing me a folder. "You can direct any concerns to our lawyers." I flipped open the folder to find documents claiming my land had been rezoned for commercial use. Horror flooded me as I scanned the bottom of the page. My signature was there, but executed in a way that felt utterly foreign. The truth hit me hard. This was forgery. "This isn't my signature. You forged this." My voice raised as disbelief turned into anger. Eleanor's eyes turned cold. "Be careful with accusations. Our association has excellent legal representation." I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police. "You're trespassing on my land." Eleanor laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. "Feel free, but say hello to Sheriff Daniels. He's on our HOA board." Panic washed over me for a fleeting moment, but I steeled myself, eyes widening in realization. I had the power to put a stop to everything. I was the county inspector tasked with overseeing construction and zoning violations, even though I'd kept that crucial detail to myself. "You have 24 hours to remove your equipment," I declared, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And after that, I'll file trespassing charges." Eleanor smirked, unfazed. "We'll be back tomorrow with our surveyor to mark the boundaries. I suggest you review those documents carefully before making threats." They left, and I surveyed the situation, taking photos of everything: the stakes, the equipment, the sinister aura surrounding them. Back at the farmhouse, I sprawled the purportedly official documents on the kitchen table, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. With shaking hands, I dialed my colleague Marcos from the zoning department. I needed confirmation. "What's this Mito Arc Estates you keep hearing about?" he asked, sounding puzzled as I relayed the situation. "Never heard of them applying for anything," he replied swiftly. "In fact, I have a permit application for a neighborhood convenience center on Route 16, but that's not near you, right?" My heart raced. Route 16 lined my south pasture, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to dig deeper. That night, I searched through my grandfather's old desk until discovering a letter warning about a potential buyout. It couldn't be a coincidence that this was happening right after his passing. As I placed the letter back in the drawer, I glanced out the window. A car that wasn't there earlier drove past slowly, its occupants wearing dark glasses, their attention seemingly fixed on my farmhouse. My pulse quickened, but before I could analyze the situation further, a fierce knocking jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. I rushed to the window, and my heart sank. 3 bulldozers were lined up against my property, their engines revving ominously. Panic surged through me as I saw Eleanor by the driveway, flanked by a crew wearing hard hats. I raced outside, still in my pajamas. "You are trespassing," I shouted, waving my phone like a weapon. Eleanor only smiled, businesslike. "We've got everything we need right here." She brandished a stack of documents proudly. "Construction is starting today. Before you get in our way, I suggest you read these permits." As I scanned the papers, I realized the horrible truth. My colleague Diane had signed off on everything. How had they orchestrated this? My mind raced, piecing together the dark web of lies surrounding me. "Those documents require environmental reviews," I protested. but Eleanor remained. As the sun descended behind the hills, casting a haunting glow over my family's land, I realized not only my ownership was at stake, but the very legacy of everything my grandfather had built stood in the balance, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. That evening, I paced in my kitchen, flipping through the papers filled with fraudulent signatures and altered documents. Each page looked like a puzzle piece waiting to reveal a bigger picture, one where the Hargroves controlled every aspect of the county's government. Their network of deceit crept into every crevice of my life, and fear gnawed at my insides. I needed a plan. I needed allies. Marcos had promised to dig deeper into the county's records, but the clock was running against me. They would try to destroy me, and I had to stay one step ahead. I decided to go through the old library of the farmhouse, hoping to find any historical records or documentation that could give me leverage. As I rummaged through dusty books and crumbling pages, the door creaked open behind me. I turned to see an elderly man stepping inside. He wore a worn-out hat and had a kind, albeit cautious expression. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaky and defensive. "Name's Frank," he said with a slow drawl. "I couldn't help but notice the ruckus going on outside your place. Thought I'd come by to see if you're all right." "Not really," I admitted, motioning for him to sit at the kitchen table. "Did you see what happened with the construction crews?" He nodded gravely. "Heard the whole neighborhood's buzzing about the Hargroves. They've been after your land for a while now, I reckon. You ain't their first target." "First target?" I repeated, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" Frank leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Meadowlark Estates isn't just after a gas station. They want a whole lot."
Of land for commercial development, stores, entertainment complexes, the whole shebang. They've been quietly buying up parcels here and there, using any means necessary. Most folks don't even know what's happening until it's too late. I felt the breath leave my body. But why? This is a small farming community. It doesn't make any sense. Frank chuckled ruefully. Money never does make sense, does it? They'll promise the world to the county council, jobs, revenue, but it always comes at a steep cost. They want to raise the heritage of this place in favor of faceless chains. As he spoke, the magnitude of the situation began to dawn on me. I wasn't just fighting for my land. I was standing against a tide that could wash away the identity of my entire community. How can I stop them? I asked, feeling a surge of determination. What can I do? The only way to fight them is with the truth, Frank replied. Gather everyone. Get their stories. People who lost their land, their homes. We need unity. You aren't alone in this fight. Inspired, I grabbed my phone and started to make calls. I would reach out to my neighbors, to those who had been affected by the Hargrove schemes before. I needed to assemble a network, a coalition to push back against Eleanor's ruthless ambitions. Afterward, with Frank's help, we visited families nearby, some of whom had lost small plots of land to the so-called development. Each home held a story, a testament to years of hard work intertwined with the land they loved. I listened intently as they recounted Eleanor's bullying tactics, threats, forgeries, and how their fears had silenced them one by one. The more I heard, the more fuel their stories added to my fire. If we stood together, we could dismantle their facade. The next day, I hosted an impromptu meeting in my barn. I set up chairs and refreshments, making the space as welcoming as possible. I wanted everyone to feel comfortable sharing their experiences. As people filtered in, I noticed the anxious glances, the shifting on feet. The specter of Eleanor Hargrove loomed large in everyone's minds. I took a deep breath and spoke when the room quieted. Thank you all for coming. I know this has been hard for many of us, and I'm sorry for any pain you faced due to the Hargroves. But I believe if we unite as a community, we can reclaim what's rightfully ours. I looked into the sea of familiar faces, their expressions shifting from doubt to cautious hope. Together, we can create a plan to protect our homes. We aren't just defending land. We're preserving the history, the legacy our families built here. I shared what I discovered from Frank and my own research, explaining how we could gather evidence and leverage the town's history against the Hargroves. A buzz of energy filled the room as ideas began to flow. Mrs. Jenkins, a sweet elderly woman who'd lived next door since I was a child, raised her hand. My late husband kept meticulous records. He documented everything about the farm and its legacy. We could use that. A chorus of agreement followed her suggestion, each voice growing louder with enthusiasm and determination. As the meeting progressed, I watched the transformation take place. Neighbors began sharing their personal stories, venting frustrations and brainstorming ideas. The unity was palpable, and I felt energized by it. Finally, we decided to form a committee to gather evidence, rally support, and plan a public meeting to bring awareness to the situation. We would take the fight directly to the town council. But as we wrapped up, the question lingered over us like a dark cloud. Would it be enough? After the meeting concluded, I stepped outside to breathe in the fresh air, a sense of accomplishment settling in, but my heart raced past any sense of relief. Would Eleanor retaliate if our efforts gained traction? I thought about the glances of concern shared between neighbors. The shadows of uncertainty persisted. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle outside sent me into alert, heart-pounding, though each noise turned out to be nothing more sinister than the nocturnal symphony of the countryside. However, my fears began to materialize when, over the next few days, little signs of harassment started showing up. Stones were tossed onto my porch, strange car tracks marred my driveway, and my livestock seemed increasingly agitated. Then came the midnight phone call. A muffled voice echoed on the line. "You don't know who you're messing with," the voice warned. "You won't be able to stop this." I hung up, heart hammering against my ribs, blood rushing in my ears. But with that call came something even mightier, the realization that I could be touching a nerve. I had awakened something in Eleanor that she wanted to keep buried. Gathering my resolve, I could feel the outrage boiling in my veins. I wouldn't be intimidated. I had to protect not only my land, but an entire community that deserved to thrive. As I stood by my window, peering out into the darkening night, the contours of the land I cherished were illuminated by the faint glow of the moon. Tomorrow would come, and with a new dawn of our battle against Eleanor Hargrove and her insatiable greed. The day of the town council meeting arrived, and I felt a tumult of nerves and excitement swirling within me. The air was thick with anticipation as townsfolk gathered, their faces a mix of fear, determination, and hope. The stakes couldn't have been higher, not just for my family, but for the very essence of our community. As I walked into the town hall, I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. The walls were adorned with decades of history, the photographs of past councils and town events serving as a reminder of our shared identity. I hoped we would stand strong as an echo of those who had come before us. The room filled quickly, a buzz of conversation echoing off the vintage tiles. Neighbors I had spoken to at the barn meeting shared knowing nods and reassuring smiles, signaling that they stood with me. I took my place at the front of the room, flanked by Frank and a few others from our coalition. Eleanor Hargrove was already seated at the front, a confident smirk etched onto her face, flanked by her circle of aides. Her presence loomed like an omen, but I refused to let her intimidate me. I remembered our shared laughter and stories, of neighbors banding together as we celebrated the harvest, the kids running around the fields, the summer nights we spent exchanging tales and making memories. This was worth fighting for. The council members took their seats, and murmurs settled down as the meeting began. The mayor opened the floor, welcoming public comments. I raised my hand, my voice steady despite the tension knotting in my chest. I would like to address the recent actions surrounding Metok Estates and the Hargroves' plans for development. As I spoke, I channeled every ounce of frustration, sadness, and defiance into my words, recounting the stories of neighbors who had suffered under Eleanor's deception. I highlighted our history, the generations that had devoted themselves to this land, and urged everyone to see beyond the superficial promises of jobs and revenue that her company offered. Growth does not come at the expense of our roots. We cannot allow our town to transform into something unrecognizable, I concluded, feeling the weight of my words hang in the air. Cheers erupted from the crowd. People stood and clapped, and I felt emboldened. Next, Frank stepped up, sharing documentation, historical records, personal accounts, and outlines of the Hargroves' manipulations. Each piece laid bare the extent of their greed, revealing their unscrupulous tactics to take what didn't belong to them. Eleanor's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance, and I could feel the tension crackling in the room like summer lightning. After a few more heartfelt testimonies from community members, it was time for her to respond. She stood, straightening her blazer, her voice laced with disdain. I am committed to improving this community. Change is necessary for progress. These people simply wish to maintain the status quo. But the audience was no longer captivated by her words. They had seen the truth, long buried beneath layers of deceit. They had heard the stories of loss and of a community ready to stand together. The tide was shifting, and even some of the council members exchanged murmurs, glancing uneasily at Eleanor, who had grown increasingly agitated. Then, as if fate were on our side, Clara Thompson, a longtime council member and an old friend of my grandfather, stood up. It is our duty to listen to our constituents. We must protect the heritage that this community embodies. Her stance was a powerful declaration that resonated throughout the room. The tide was now undeniable. Arguments erupted in support of rejecting the Hargroves plans, emphasizing the need to preserve our town's identity. With each testament, Eleanor's mask began to crack, and her once sure composure faltered. Finally, the mayor called for a vote. As fingers raised in solidarity, I held my breath. Moments dragged on like hours as the council members tallied the votes, their eyes drifting occasionally back to Eleanor, whose expression morphed from anger to disbelief. When the mayor announced a final count, a clear majority against the proposal, emotions exploded. Elation swept through the audience, jubilation erupting as people embraced one another, laughter mingling with tears. I'm not sure how long the celebration lasted, but in those brief moments of victory, I felt the weight of generations lift. I had helped protect not just my family's land, but the legacy of countless lives entwined with this community. After the meeting wound down, as the crowd began to disperse, I spotted Eleanor, seething rage incarnate as she stormed out of the council chambers. I felt a moment of vindication, but reminded myself that the battle may not yet be over. I shared hugs and high fives, receiving thanks from neighbors and friends, each voice melding into a chorus of gratitude. That night, I stood on my porch, gazing out at the fields bathed in moonlight, a sense of peace settling over me. The fight had not only safeguarded our land, it had reignited the bond within our community, reminiscent of the enduring spirit that has always defined us. As I turned to go inside, I felt a firm grip of hope in my chest. Perhaps this was only the beginning, but with my neighbors by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges might come. Together, we would ensure the heart of our home remained alive, burning bright against any shadows that dared to threaten it.